Thesis. Beginning in the early 1980s, Atari and Activision, both leading game companies of their time, began producing low-quality and low-budget games. These preposterous, poor-quality games led to a distrust in the gaming industry until Nintendo released their Nintendo Entertainment System, more commonly known as the NES for short, which included games such as Super Mario Bros. And Tetris. Nintendo saving the industry was a massive turning point in gaming history. Chapter 1. The Rise. In today's world, we have millions, maybe billions of games out there to choose from, and for most, you don't even have to leave the comfort of your own home to get them. Not only that, but there is a massive variety of genres to choose from, with a massive library of games to call their own. Do you want a first-person shooter game? No problem. Well, how about a city simulator? Easy. No matter the game, you can find it. But it wasn't always this way. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, video games were more popular than ever before. Atari was dominating the industry, but that doesn't mean that no one else was competing for the throne. There were other companies, like Activision. They were full of rogue Atari developers who had left to make their own company, which would be focused on computer gaming instead of cartridge-based gaming like Atari had been doing. Business was great for both companies, but sadly, that wouldn't last long.
Chapter 2. The Decline.
An Atari developer who goes by the name Howard Scott Warshaw went to try to get the necessary rights to make a game based on the film E.T., the Extraterrestrial. It seemed like nothing could have gone wrong, but when they ended up making the game, it was not the amazing masterpiece that the devs had once hoped it would be. While it isn't the only reason for the crash, it was certainly a big one. This bad game led to people noticing that there were plenty of other bad games out there. Since there weren't online user reviews at the time, it was very difficult to know what games were good and what games were bad without buying them first. This led to people thinking that all games were low quality and cheaply made. Eventually, people stopped buying games altogether. Arcade and PC games were still doing well, but Atari and cartridge games as a whole weren't. During the video game crash, video game sales dropped from 97% from $3.2 billion in 1982 to $100 million by 1985. It was even recently discovered that Atari buried most of the extra cartridges it didn't sell. They buried 728 to be exact, although not all of them were of E.T. The location where they were buried was even found. Things looked bad for the industry, so bad that companies were starting to lower their prices to a point where they were just begging people to buy the products so that they weren't a complete waste. This wasn't at all what the devs and management at Atari had wanted, but thankfully, things were about to change for the better.
Chapter 3. The Future. Now, until we continue, let's get introduced to Nintendo. From 1889 to the 1980s, they were a successful toy company that made simple things like playing cards and board games. They were doing very well in that business, but one day, a man who goes by the name Shigeru Miyamoto decided to join the company when he was 24 years old after graduating from art school. While there, he became vital in helping Nintendo move into the gaming industry when they noticed how popular video games were becoming. They decided to change things up and started developing their own games. They did this because the cartridge industry had died, so if they made a good game with good advertising, they could make a large profit. What they made was one of the most well-known and influential games ever, even today. They released the original Super Mario Bros. For the NES. It was a huge hit, with its simple platforming and great graphics for the time. They also released other hits, like Tetris, which was recently beaten by a 13-year-old boy. Even Sega got on the action and released their SG-1000, which had a few games on it. This revived the industry, and many others started releasing games, but they either didn't last, or they were put on third-party consoles, such as the NES or the SG-1000. While some may say that none of this matters, I beg to differ. Without Nintendo doing what they did, and Sega following suit, we wouldn't have games today, or at the very least in the same way. We needed Nintendo to release the NES to have what we do. The release of it led to us having all that we do today, like the PS5, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox Series X, with all the games that they have, like Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Minecraft, and so many more. So, now that I've explained all that you need to know about the crash, I only have one question. Wanna hop on?